Good afternoon, everyone, and I wish to welcome the officials of the Ministry of Public Administration and Communications and their agencies, members of the media, and members of the listening public. I am Bridget Anisette George, Chairman of the Committee on Public Administration and Appropriations of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. The Committee on Public Administration and Appropriations has a mandate to consider and report to the House on A, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies to ensure that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. B, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies as it occurs and keeps Parliament informed of how the budget allocation is being implemented. And C, the administration of government agencies to determine hindrances to their efficiency and to make recommendations to the government for improvement of public administration. The purpose of this 20th public meeting of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee for the 11th Parliament is to examine the expenditure and internal controls of the Ministry of Public Administration and Communication as it pertains to the following: accountability and transparency, Subhead 02, Goods and Services, Subhead 03, Minor Equipment Purchases, Subhead 04, Current Transfers and Subsidies, Subhead 09, Development Program Consolidated Fund, Infrastructure Development Fund, the third report of the Committee on Inventory Control in the Public Service, the fourth report of the Committee on Internal Audit in the Public Service, and monthly expenditure record for the period October to December 2017. This committee is desirous of hearing from the Ministry of Public Administration and Communications to discover any challenges being faced. The committee hopes that the meeting will be fruitful and provide workable solutions to improve the expenditure and internal controls of the ministry. This meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11, Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's inquiry by email, parl101@ttparliament.org, facebook.com/ttparliament, Twitter @ttparliament. I now will invite the representatives of the Ministry of Public Administration and Communication to introduce themselves. And I start with Madam P.S.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Joan Mendez, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Public Administration and Communications.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. Claudel McKellar, Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Public Administration and Communications.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Shali Sultani-Maharaj, Coordinator, Property and Real Estate Services Division.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. I am Catherine Romain, Executive Director, National Library and Information System Authority, NALIS.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. I'm Charles Bobb-Semple, the Chief Executive Officer at the National ICT Center.
Thank you very much, and might I ask the members of the committee to introduce themselves, starting at my extreme right.
Afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Jennifer Rafool, member.
Good afternoon, Brigadier General Ansel Antwine, member.
Good afternoon, Lakram Bodo, Vice Chairman.
Good afternoon, I'm Ayana Webster-Roy, member.
Good afternoon, my name is Daniel Duque, member.
And the committee is ably assisted by its secretary, Ms. Kiba Jacob, its assistant secretary, Ms. Sharon Samuel, and we have also assisting us our two research assistants, Mr. Lucio and Ms. Nunes. Madam P.S., may I now invite you to make a brief opening statement with respect to your ministry.
Thank you, Chair. The Ministry of Public Administration and Communications is the central agency with the responsibility for improving service delivery to citizens. Much of our work occurs in what is known as the back end through the strengthening of the human resource management system, the structures, training of public officers, the development of human resource management policies and practices. We also improve business processes and public service delivery and infrastructure, such as office accommodation and ICTs. With regard to the information portfolio, we have oversight for freedom of information and data protection, along with the provision of various information and communication services through NALIS, Archives, Government Printery, iGovTT, CNMG, and TAT. Good governance is not only about the service delivered and how timely it was and whether it satisfied the citizens' need. The entire chain is part of delivery, and in public administration, value for money, transparency, and accountability all play key roles. We are always aware that what we do and how we do things are equally important. The ministry recognizes that systems built on transparency and accountability promote trust in public service agencies and public officials. This ministry is committed to ensuring that public resources are used in an accountable way, and that decisions and public dealings are not only transparent, but based on integrity and due diligence, and consistent with policies and laws. The ministry manages its assets, both physical and human, in a manner to ensure best value for money and elimination of waste of public resources. In the spirit of transparency and accountability, my team and I stand ready to answer this committee's questions into our operations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam PS. And I would just like to start off our conversation with a statement coming out of your own statement, which I think finds favor with the committee in terms of systems built on transparency and accountability promote trust. And therefore, I wanted to jump off the conversation with respect to looking at accountability and transparency, and particularly in light of your own written submissions. And in looking at your written submissions, I have seen that in the discharge of your responsibility as accounting officer, you depend on your internal audit unit. And I wanted to find out, firstly, in respect to the number of divisional heads who report to you.
Certainly. Thank you very much. Yes, I am dependent on my internal audit, which will usually at the beginning of the year will produce their work program. But who reports to me will be my Director of Public Service Academy, the Coordinator of Property, Real Estate and Services Division, the Executive Director of the National ICT Division, who has not assumed duty as yet, but we do hope soon, the ICT Director, the Government Communications Specialist, the Director of Information Division, Director of Finance and Accounts, and certainly the Auditor too.
Thank you. So there would mean that there are 8 divisional heads who are to report to you, but in fact there are 7 reporting right now. Would I be correct in saying that?
I omitted the government archivist.
Okay, so there are 9. But you said that one, I think is the Executive Director, ICT, has not as yet, that post has not yet been filled?
We did carry out the recruitment selection, we are in consultation with respect to the package that was offered by the Chief Personnel Officer.
So that in terms of that post, there's no reporting function at all, or does somebody else report under that division?
What we have is a shared service, shared responsibility, the ICT Director, the Executive Director of External ICT Relations, and Management Specialists, in collaboration with the Acting CEO of iGov, will manage that portfolio for me.
Thank you. So roughly 8 or 9 quarterly reports are prepared. Are they prepared at the commencement of the reporting period, at commencement of the quarter, or at the end of the quarter?
At the beginning of the year, all, and this is the entire ministry, what we will do through the Human Resource Management Division, have all heads with their staff develop their position descriptions. And we will either undertake quarterly reports for those fairly new officers who may need that additional supervision and coaching. But for the mature officers, we will do half-yearly reports.
Okay, so that, just so that I can understand, in terms of your submission, what we are told is one control measure is the preparation of quarterly returns of delegated expenditure by divisional heads to the accounting officer. That is different to the reports of which you speak.
Yes.
Yes?
What has happened, I have delegated authority in terms of expenditure. So from the deputy permanent secretaries and directors, they would have been delegated authority in terms of expenditure limits. So at every quarter, they do submit what expenditure that they would have approved.
And in terms of those reports, how many are those returns? In terms of how many do you get? 2, 3? I'm not certain.
100%.
100%?
Yes.
All right. So in terms of all the divisions, we are now in fiscal 2018. When would have been the last quarterly return of delegated expenditure you would have received?
Well, I was out on vacation, so I would have received at the beginning of February the quarterly returns for the period October to December. Yes.
Okay. And when these returns are received, what happens to them?
Well, certainly, the accounting officer, I will have to ensure that the expenditure limits that were delegated are contained and abided by in terms of the necessary regulations. I should add, because of the economic climate, the expenditure for the delegated has not been very hefty for the past quarter.
What that means is that the expenditure has been low, or there have been no instances of excess?
No excess because of lack of releases in some of the areas.
Okay. In the event that there's an excess in expenditure over the limits, what should ideally happen?
The accounting officer will have to write to the officer, indicated that they would have gone over their limit, and seek an explanation.
Thank you. Now, your internal audit department, what role does it play in monitoring this?
The internal audit, as I said, would have prepared work programs, and the various heads who would have gotten delegated authority would be of established offices. So the Director of Public Management Consulting Division, the Director of Public Service Academy, Government Archives. With the Director of Finance, the auditor would ensure that the necessary limits would have abided by the necessary estimates and the releases, and in accordance with the financial regulations.
So, might I ask, what is the size of your internal audit unit?
At this time, we have one auditor, two auditing assistants who will be acting, and a clerical assistant who would have been assigned to give that administrative support.
And are you satisfied that the size of your unit as currently configured is adequate to give the support that you require and to fulfill their responsibilities for this merged ministry?
At this time, we are undertaking an organizational review, which you would have seen in the submission. It's in draft because we are waiting the approval of our strategic plan. From the review, it seems that we are overstaffed, but I'm not in agreement. So I still need to have some discussion with the Public Management Consulting Division.
So that Audit Unit, are you satisfied?
Yes.
That it is sufficiently resourced to provide you with the support you require for your staff as currently configured? Not what it's supposed to be ideally, but what you have now.
It is adequately staffed. What we will need would be some development of certain skills and competencies.
So that's
training, particularly with the ICT audit. We know there are some areas that need some development in the internal audit with respect to that type of audit function.
Okay, so we leave that for when we come to training. Now, as far as the strategic plan, you said is in draft. What is the status of that? Because it seems that so many other things would flow from the approval of your strategic plan.
It is before Cabinet, and we will get a response soon. However, that has not constrained us in terms of preparing our work plans in sync with the strategic plan, because it all supports our portfolio with respect to human resource management, ICT development, communications. So not having official approval does not stymie the operations of the ministry. We proceed as if it has been approved.
Thank you. Now, do you have a monitoring and evaluation unit?
Through the Strategic Services Division, which is under the purview of my Deputy Permanent Secretary, we have officers within that unit who undertake monitoring and evaluation. But that is one area that we hope to do some more recruitment in order to enhance the delivery of that particular service.
So the Strategic Services Division, what is the remit of that? Because I get the impression it is wider than just a monitor and evaluation unit. So what is the remit of that?
My Deputy Permanent Secretary can add some further information, but it is used as our policy formulation, strategic planning, monitoring and evaluation of our own work programs, but also monitoring and evaluation and oversight for my state agencies, for example, iGov, NALIS, STAT. So they will deal with the collation of administrative reports, ensuring that the strategic plans produced by these agencies are in line with the government thrust, National Development Strategy, as well as the strategic plan of the line ministry. I don't know if TPS would like to add.
Madam Chair, I think PS adequately covered it, but suffice it to say the division does provide policy support both to the ministry itself as well as external agencies who may come to us from time to time to seek advice, support in their own policy development initiatives, and we willingly do so. In addition to that, the division also prepares responses to parliamentary questions, for example, and even this request for information submission. Yeah.
So then maybe, Mr. Deputy PS, you could assist me, because I saw reference to this project review board, and that's what led to the questioning about the existence of a monitoring and evaluation unit. So that I wanted to find out what, therefore, is this project review board? How is it constituted? How does it differ from a monitoring and evaluation unit? Now, I understand you don't have a monitoring and evaluation unit, but the function is carried out by your Strategic Services Division. And therefore, I think, therefore, the question is really, what is this project review board? How does it fit in to your Strategic Services Division, what does it add, or what mischief is it intended to prevent?
I was hoping that the last word would have been prevent. The Project Review Board is not part or does not fall under the purview of the Strategic Services Division. It is actually an entity that was created by the Permanent Secretary to provide oversight for new projects that are being conceptualized and put forward within the ministry, particularly with respect to our PSIP projects. So, for example, any division within the ministry that wishes to put forward a new project, let us say for the upcoming estimates budget cycle, their initial project proposal, project documents, concepts would be presented to the Project Review Board. Let me just say what is the composition of the Project Review Board. It is currently chaired by myself, the Deputy Permanent Secretary. Other members include the Director of Finance and Accounts, our Administrative Officer 4, who is responsible for office management, the Director of Legal Services, and the head of our Strategic HR Management Division. Right, so like I said, it's essentially that entity that would examine projects for feasibility, ensuring that projects are well conceptualized, designed, that the objectives are clear, all of the relevant documents, information that would be required by the Ministry of Planning are in place. So that's the first post gate that projects would have to go through.
So that your Projects Review Board will be sort of a filter before you go on to the other stage. So this is a relatively new creature in your ministry?
No, it's not, Madam Chair. We've probably had a Project Review Board for at least the last 5 years, thereabouts.
And that would have been which side, which ministry?
In the Ministry of Public Administration. Yes.
And therefore, you would have, from the Ministry of Public Administration, you would have had, say, 5 years to assess its effectiveness. And therefore, I want to know, in your view, how effective a mechanism you found it.
I think objectively it has been rather useful. I think it is well regarded by all of the divisional heads, and it has really helped us as one of the mechanisms for developing a sound project management culture within the ministry. Heads are fairly certain that in order for their projects to go forward, they must put forward sound project proposals. So I think we're in a good place in terms of how it has operated and what it augurs to do for the ministry in the future.
So in terms of, once it has your sign-off, it goes to the next stage, the Ministry of Planning. Yes?
I wanted to add that for the past year and 5-6 months that I've been there with the Project Review Board, it has been helpful because this is the first stage before I can sign off and say, yes, I'm comfortable, I'm confident that this project will get funding. So in my evaluation, I thought that is a good team. The DPS was just recently added because he joined the ministry a couple of months ago. But since I've been there, I thought it has helped me. I know some people would not have been pleased because some of the projects did not go forward and the board did not accept in terms of what they would have provided.
Yes. So much, Madam PS, and I thought maybe you had anticipated what next I was going to ask, because you had said that you feel pretty confident that once it gets the sign-off, it's a project you'll get funding from. And therefore, to me, the test of its success would be a question of, on a percentage basis, a good guesstimate, what % of those projects would have been successful in meeting the approval of the Ministry of Planning and getting funding?
In my year and a half, I will say about, for the new projects, about 90%. We just have one, which is hinged on our national ICT plan. So once we get the plan approved, Ministry of Planning and Development has confirmed that they will provide the funding later in the year.
Thank you very much. And just one more question on this. In terms of your Strategic Services Division, which you said monitors your agencies in terms of compliance, their budgets, annual financial statements, and so on. Of the agencies under your remit, do they all have, say, risk management policies and plans?
I would say some agencies, some is a work in progress. So may I ask my heads of the state enterprises to probably speak more on that issue? Thank you.
Hey, Madam Chair, actually, we do. We actually just completed an exercise in the final stages now to have an entire risk portfolio for IGovTT of all the risks that we observe, how they will be mitigated or accepted in some cases where they will add value. So that project is in phase 3. We have one more phase to complete, and it's scheduled to end at the end of next month, March. But we do have things in place in terms of...
So that is just for IGovTT?
Yes, IGovTT.
Okay, but that's not the only agency. And therefore, I'm just using, say, risk management as an example of seeing how your Strategic Services Division meets its mandate.
In the case of NALIS, NALIS is a statutory authority with its own board. Within NALIS, there is an internal audit department with an audit committee, a board audit committee. And there are regular, frequent reports and audits done throughout the organization and most aspects of the organization. I think the concern at this point for that department, one of the major concerns would be its staffing, because since NALIS started as an entity NALIS in 1998, because NALIS came into being around then, there are some issues still needing monitoring and controlling, but it is a work in progress, and it is one that is actively engaging the board's attention.
Right. So maybe I should really go back to the PS with respect to this question. Where I'm really getting at is, according to the submission, I'm going to say SSD, okay? It monitors the agencies to ensure that they comply with the State Enterprises Performance Monitoring Manual. So I've just picked out one aspect, and I therefore ask you as PS, in terms of, say, risk management, and it could be anything, but this comes out of the State Enterprises Performance Monitoring Manual. In terms of the agencies, and I think you listed them in the beginning, all of which have not remained in my mind, but I know NALIS is one, IGOT is one, and so on. In terms of all of them, which are about 7, how many of them have a risk management policy as set out in this State Enterprises Performance Monitoring Manual, right, which sets out what it's supposed to look like? I think it's page 118, which talks about strategic risk, operational risk, reporting risk, and all those risks. I want to know how many of them are compliant if you have a whole division ensuring compliance of your agencies in accordance with the State Enterprises Monitoring Manual.
Okay, Madam Chair, we will have to really get some more information from the division, but from where I sit, I know we have plans both from iGov and from NALIS, and through monitoring of the administrative reports. I cannot say safely about CMNG, because that's the other state enterprise. So we may have to provide some more information in writing.
Thank you so much. And in terms of your underperforming programs and projects, again, this comes in with your internal audit unit function, and you had indicated in your response that underperforming projects are identified during monthly reviews and so on. And I would just wanted to know if you could give us a recent example of an underperforming project, and in terms of what sort of appropriate assistance would have been given and corrective action taken with respect to the deliverables?
I would have highlighted the deployment or development of the ICT plan. That would have been underperforming because we would not have received releases due to the non-approval as yet of the National ICT Plan. We also have the digitization of media assets, which was a project under the former Government Information Services Limited. Due to lack of reports and having an idea of the scope and what was achieved in that project, we have had challenges. So I have put together a team led by the government archivist to rescope and to make the project align to some of our information services and archival needs in order that we can move that project later in the fiscal year. So
this project would have been identified through the structures you all would have put in place in terms of the function of your internal audit, because I believe it's the internal audit unit which does this sort of function according to your submission.
In collaboration with, of course, accounts and our strategic services. The digitization of media assets would have been a PSIP project that we inherited from the Government Information Services Limited under the former Ministry of Communications. The ICT Plan, that would have been a project through the former Ministry of Science and Technology, which would have been incorporated within the new portfolio of Ministry of Public Administration and Communications. However, the funding is hinged on the approval of the National Information Communication Technology Plan, which is now going through its final consultation stage before returning to Cabinet for approval.
And satellite units, what are these?
These will be really the various divisions. They use that term, which will include the PMCD, Information Division, Press D, and Archives.
Okay, so that the monthly heads of division meetings are with all your divisions?
All the heads, Deputy Permanent Secretary, the line minister, who will chair. In absence, I will chair. We have monthly meetings to keep abreast of the operations, the challenges, and how are we moving, particularly with PSIP.
Okay, and the monthly meeting for February 2018, has that taken place as yet?
We had one late January. DPS would have chaired that, so the next meeting is the second Tuesday in March.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll invite other members. Dr. Bodo.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome again, PS. I just want to put our discussion into perspective and refer back to your own statement and, of course, the goals of the Ministry of Public Administration and Communication. And if you will permit me to refer to your budgetary allocation for financial year 2017-2018, and just to ask whether you can indicate the percentage of the allocation that would have been expended, let's say, for the first 4 months of the financial year from October to January, under the subheadings perhaps of goods and services, the development program, and the IDF. Would you be in a position to give us some idea of what would have been expended so far?
I will have to provide a percentage in writing. However, for the first quarter, the releases would have focused on personal expenditure, salaries. We would have received in latter part of the financial first quarter, December, releases to treat with our standing payments and utilities, rents, electricity, water rates, and janitorial and security services. So we are trying to clear backlog and at the same time run with the current bills that we are, of course, receiving every day and, of course, receiving calls for the payment of the services provided. We are, let's say, in a catch-up all the time.
Thank you. In terms of your development programs going forward, though, has it, what sort of impact has it had on the program?
a great impact because we have not really received releases under the development program, with the exception of our project that deals with the property management and information system, where we are creating a database at this first stage of our leases and rentals. So we have received releases under that project.
Thank you. I just wanted to raise an issue with regards to some of the issues that arose from the merging of the Ministry of Public Administration and the Ministry of Communications. That merger would have taken place when?
The first merger would have been in 2015, and then in 2016, the merger of the Ministry of Communications.
Right. From your submission, I know that you've had some delays in obtaining approvals and/or authorizations from the Service Commissions Department regarding the transfer of employees from the former ministries to the new ministry. My question to you would be, has there been any progress in obtaining these approvals and authorizations from Service Commissions Department with regard to the transfer of the employees?
Yes.
And if I may just, okay, sure, go ahead.
There has been great improvement. Up to yesterday, I received a batch of transfers for persons under the Public Management Consulting Division and other areas in the ministry. So we are seeing improvement because our Human Resource Management Division is in daily contact with the Service Commissions Department personnel for outstanding approvals.
Can you then indicate perhaps the number of employees who would still be awaiting this authorization approval? Do you have an idea?
I wouldn't have the figures right now, but I will say it's minimal because I would have signed for the Government Princery Information Division throughout the last 3 to 4 months. So it will be a minimal amount.
Okay, thank you. Just one more question. In terms of the strategic plan, which you alluded to, can you indicate when this plan was submitted for approval?
And towards the end of the last financial year.
Can you indicate whether you've made any, whether you've sought any feedback from the Cabinet with regards to the status?
Yes, we are in touch with the Cabinet, and actually we have done a revision. So we have submitted a revised version, just a tweaking here or there what we did based on the economic climate. We thought there were some programs we needed to probably shift, for further in the plan.
Member Duque.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Permanent Secretary, I too would like to refer to your opening remarks where you highlighted a few items which caught my attention. You addressed briefly the issue of value for money and the elimination of waste, which I look as one construct. You also spoke to the issue of building public trust and service delivery, and you also highlighted the issue of the management of assets, both physical assets and human assets. And in your submissions, as we would have heard also in our discussion so far, the strategic plan, how are these issues, value for money, elimination of waste, public trust, how are these variables addressed in your strategic plan?
Thank you, Member, for that question. In respect of the strategic plan, I don't have the plan here with me, but these will be governance issues in terms of what policies, internal policies, operational policies we would put in place. You would see we are moving towards developing an acceptable code of behavior, code of acceptable business practices within the ministry, which we disseminate through our orientation, through our intranet. We have constant communication with staff. Through our meetings, our heads meetings, the Deputy Permanent Secretary and I will apprise people. This is the approach in terms of value for money, how we can achieve it through our best procurement practices. We have an internal procurement unit, which at this time is a pilot test in order to get ourselves ready for the full proclamation of the Procurement Act. So the procurement unit is staffed by 2 administrative assistants, a clerical staff, and I must say it's very commendable. They have prepared operational policies, practices in terms of how approvals must be obtained. We have centralized the approach in terms of acquisition of our goods and services, our janitorial and security, with the exception of Presdy, who will treat with some of the issues under their portfolio. So generally, these are some of the, in terms of our systems, our policies, and best practices we are doing internally to ensure that we can achieve value for money, transparency, accountability. We also have the Freedom of Information Unit. We get many requests for documents, and we are able to share because, in terms of our openness and transparency of our operations, we can provide documentation as requested.
Further, Madam Chair, in the context of your strategic plan, and I'm sure there would have been a strategic planning exercise, if I am to ask you, what is the vision of the ministry, the overall vision of the ministry, which I expect would speak to some of the issues that you just articulated? What would you say?
We are striving to be the premier agency. The premier public service agency in terms of good governance. We are also looking not only within Trinidad and Tobago, because many of our CARICOM territories look to us for assistance in policies, in achieving certain delivery. For example, I've been invited through a webinar to share some of our programs. We have launched an e-based competency and online training. So, the ministry has been asked to share the practices and the experiences.
So you are striving to be what, the premier?
Public service agency in terms of public administration in Trinidad and Tobago.
And in terms of the strategic planning exercise, could you tell me who were the key people involved in the exercise and the level of participation and involvement?
When I joined the ministry, the exercise was in train because it started under the Ministry of Public Administration. It was led by the Deputy Permanent Secretary at that time and 3 stakeholders from the Strategic Services Division and other divisional heads who would have met with the various stakeholders, staff, and have staff meetings, staff retreats. Of course, the involvement of the minister was crucial. We carried it through in terms of having further engagement with the heads of divisions and getting feedback from the staff through the use of our intranet and so on.
And you would say that there is a high level of buy-in to the plan?
Yes, it's a high level of buy-in, and what we are doing from March, Deputy Permanent Secretary and I will be meeting in the staff divisions, sharing the plan and getting feedback again, because things change within a year or 2. People may have different thoughts, different ways. For example, I'm getting a lot of emails from staff. They come and meet me and they say, PS, we can save money by doing this or doing that. So, we have people who want to give feedback. So we are looking at how we can have that engagement and feedback mechanism. Because staff, they are engaged and they want to really contribute in terms of, making the public service, of course, the ministry more efficient and effective.
Thank you. Thank you.
Member Webster Roy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Madam PS. In your written submission, you noted that on average, 3,000 public servants are trained annually. How has this affected the overall performance of the public service?
Well, this is one area that we need through the Public Service Academy to strengthen, and that is our evaluation mechanism. We do the first level mechanism in terms of evaluation, where at the end of the program, we get feedback in terms of the delivery, the presenters, and the cost. actually how the course would have been in terms of the content. We are trying now to move to the second level where we are going to be engaging the supervisors to assess whether learning took place. Okay, you had your staff exposed to certain programs. How is the skill level, the behavior, the attitude? Did you see a change? So we are really trying to move to that level of evaluation in this year.
The reason why I asked the question is most times when we examine entities, the issue of training and development always comes up. So might be need for training in internal audit or train different areas, and you're only managing to do 3,000 persons per year. I know the public service is made up of more than 3,000. The fact that you can't capture everybody, how is that impacting on our ability to serve the people of Trinidad and Tobago?
Yes, it will have an impact, and we have devised certain strategies. For example, for the current year, we are training in customer service delivery. We had embarked on a train the trainers, in that we pulled facilitators from various ministries who are going back to their ministries and undertaking customer service training. We are also moving into a mechanism of online training. We are doing a pilot project through the Strategic Human Resource Management Division, and it has been overwhelming because we have engaged certain ministries at this time in computer training, business writing, and we are going to move into other modules, for example, customer service training. So we are seeing the need in terms of capturing more and the means through online training. This also is dependent on getting certain funding because we would need to put certain systems in place and personnel in order to carry out that training.
I know oftentimes people refer to IGovTT as the backbone. What role, if any, are you playing to help the ministry with their human capital development thrust?
So IGovTT, you're right, one aspect is the backbone. So we provide the backbone for government to be able to communicate, that is referred to as GovNet. We also provide the portal, which is the citizens interacting. With regard to training, when we have arrangements in enterprise agreements where part of the arrangement is to provide online training. So the IT, specifically this is for ICT though. So we provide the ICT training for the various ministry IT managers on a regular basis. At each sitting, it takes approximately 20 persons, and training occurs minimum every 2 months on different aspects of a SharePoint and so on. So we do have that part, and we also provide assistance to ministries who may require business process re-engineering and so on. We have that capability in-house, and we will have knowledge sharing with them. So when we do it, we also share the knowledge to assist them as well.
Madam PS, and also to IGovTT, have you considered any innovative strategies, for example, maybe it's a process or tools to further enhance our ability to reach the training needs and training demands, and also to ensure that we have better connectivity across the different entities? So, for example, if a training program is developed at one organization, but it may benefit people in another, how they could leverage from that? What you all have considered along that line, please?
So right now we are considering how we could improve certain aspects of our infrastructure, both infrastructure, the portal and GovNet. We in some final discussions in terms of having a mechanism where we could, what you're more or less referring to is collaboration, and improve the collaboration amongst the various ministries, divisions, and agencies. Upon completion, it would have a budgetary aspect to it, and we would liaise with the ministry in terms of advancing and moving forward. However, there are things currently that government has, and we are in discussions with those ministries who would have procured those items and probably not using it to its fullest capacity, to be able to leverage on those things and act as if you want to have a better word, a go-between, so that we could all benefit from this purchase or this infrastructure, this technology that this ministry or division has purchased. So we are advancing on both streams in terms of improvement on infrastructure, as well as having a landscape of all the ICT that exists and how we could improve the efficiency and use of certain technology that was already purchased for one, but for all. Yeah.
Madam Chair, through you, just to add to what the CEO iGov added from on the ministry's standpoint, 2 initiatives. We have embarked on soliciting for ministries and departments a listing of their transformation, reform, innovation projects. So that would allow us at the ministry to not only have a greater sense as to what are the initiatives on the ground, but being able to provide coordination, technical support, and as you indicated, if there are best practices or good innovations taking place in one agency, particularly with respect to training, those could be applied elsewhere. The other thing that we've done, and it's probably not in the submission, but mindful of the current financial challenges with respect particularly to being able to source training providers. The ministry recently wrote to all PSs and heads requesting their submission of technical professionals in their ministries who might be able to serve as adjunct lecturers, facilitators to the Public Service Academy. So one, that would certainly allow trainers who are from within the public service, understand the public service environment, the policies, procedures, and even public officers themselves. So we see those at least 2 initiatives that we have been embarked on to assist in that training area.
Member Raful.
Thank you, Chair. To the PS, I really appreciated what you said about staff members having ideas on cost-saving opportunities. I'm curious to hear a few examples of what staff members have said.
For example, they will have come because we would have had some problems with short-term employment. Some of the staffing levels would have decreased because of allocation. So they will give examples. Well, PS, instead of purchasing X or Y for executives, probably you can eliminate some of that, half that, and probably utilize the funding to get more staff on. They come with certain things. Let us have more programs within rather than sourcing outside, and you have to pay a service provider. We have people with certain talent. For example, for our last activity, for Christmas, staff came together. They didn't have to rely on the ministry to have activities. They did things. They do team building things amongst themselves. We have, of course, the sense of duty in terms of you turn off the lights, you turn off your computer. We share resources instead of having a lot of paper. We tend to do things through our internet, email. Some submissions, before I come and file, I'll review it and have the necessary changes, and then the final version will come for approval because of our public service regulations that you need to have hard copies. So, staff would have been providing different areas. Training, we have heads of department, they pull together because of their knowledge, competencies, and they conduct programs. Even ourselves, right now we are doing a lead-in for results for our staff, led by our staff members. So these are some of the strategies.
Okay, excellent. I have a few other questions.
Another area, and I think this is one I'm very proud of, in terms of our property management information system. When it was conceptualized, it was through a service provision of an IT provider. That wasn't fulfilled in the last financial year. We have on-the-job trainees who are software developers who actually develop the program in-house.
Excellent.
and of course has caused a saving in terms of that system. So these are some of the areas that we have really, seen the talent and opportunities emerge.
Excellent. I'm really happy to hear that. I have a few other questions. Well, one of the questions I have is on the cost of property rentals. The allocation in the last fiscal year was $30 million. This year was 20. And you said in your response in the written submission that that drastic change in the allocation didn't affect the ministry significantly. You were able to save, I think, $250,000 by not continuing to rent a storage unit in Aruca, as well as there was an amount owing, I think, of about $2 million. I'll find the exact figures. So I'm curious as to the reason for being able to operate with the same rental properties with a third of the budget reduced. So I'm curious as to how such a significant savings was able to be executed.
I will have my coordinator, Presty, give you some more information, but we did do some realigning in terms of our relocation of staff, where we were able to bring staff into other areas that were free rental, office accommodation. We also look at our storage spaces. We would have used other entities and free office space in order to store. We had ministries who were now developing certain divisions. So where we would have been storing our computers or furnishings, these ministries would have access, instead of going and having to purchase, we were able to transfer some of these assets. So all these sorts of areas were able to help us reduce in terms of our expenditure. But I'm sure the coordinator will be able to provide some further information.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Also, we did give up a few properties so that the rental sums would have declined, but we have also been able to renegotiate some of our rental rates so that some of the rental rates may be less than it was previously. Yes?
As a follow-up question to that.
Sure.
Currently, you only rent 2 properties, the Nallis building, as well as one on Mary Street. So with those 2 renegotiated, or were other ones given up? I know that there was only one that was mentioned that was given up, and that was the storage facility in Aruca.
Yes. Yes, I'm not sure.
The votes that we were responding to only provide for funding for Nallis and Mary Street, but we do have other votes from which we pay office rental. It would not have been included. So Mrs. Maharaj will be able to speak to PMCD, PresD, and that's it. Information Division now it's in our state-owned building, so we don't pay any rent for Information Division.
Okay.
Yeah, so certainly the rents for PresD, it doesn't come out of the vote that you are referencing at the moment. We have not yet renegotiated the rents, but we anticipate that it will be reduced. We are awaiting the advice of the Commissioner of Valuations to formalize the arrangements, but we have already signaled that intent with the landlord, and the landlord does appear to be agreeable. Yes, and in the case of the PMCD, their offices were relocated. They were in Chaguanas, so they were relocated to Port of Spain, again, an existing office, for which rents were already being paid by the ministry. So that would have been a cost saving, and now we hope to relocate them shortly, within a few weeks, which will help us to realize a further savings.
Excellent. I'm curious, because you've done so well with being able to renegotiate rents so far, how much more do you think you can reduce current expenses by and having the same outcomes and outputs?
This is in reference to other ministries, rental.
To your ministry and your overall expenditure, whether that be administration side or rental side, or your other major costs.
Okay, so I can speak to the issue of rents particularly. Unfortunately, a major part of our rental expenditure has to do with subleasing agreements for the International Waterfront Complex, right? So those we are really not in a position to renegotiate. So that, and also for the Ministry of Education Tower. Again, we're not really in a position to renegotiate those. Those are subject to terms and conditions contained in a sublease agreement. So that certainly all those that are that we can renegotiate, we have successfully been renegotiating. And if I may say, not just for this ministry, but for all ministries that may be appearing before you. We have been actively trying to renegotiate rents.
Okay.
Yes.
So there's some opportunity for things that are not within the Ministry of Education or the International Waterfront Complex, but for other properties.
For other ministries, because under this ministry, we really do not rent a significant number of properties, right? But for other ministries, yes. And in fact, we've been vacating quite a few properties, again, because we've been rationalizing the use of space. Under Prestige, we also have the government office outfitting policy, which speaks to the space requirements of offices, and it takes into consideration the number of staff, the different levels of staff, and the functions of the particular office. And we determine space requirements so that we've been trying to rationalize the quantum of space that is rented. Very often we find that from one office to another there are significant differences, a great disparity in the amount of space that is allocated to a particular office holder. So through our office outfitting policy, we are trying to rationalize that and bring greater equity. And we are requiring that ministries adhere to the policy in any new refurbishment works or in any new rentals, right? So that the standards are being applied.
And the offices that are located at the International Waterfront and the Ministry of Education, who owns those? Are those UDICOT or are those owned by individuals?
So it is a sublease agreement that we have with UDICOT. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
There was another question I had on the project that was started in 2006. I'll find the exact name, but it's the one that was on the strengthening of the ministry. And it was projected to cost $6 million, I think, and $250,000, but in the end costed $48 million. I was curious as to why such a large increase in expenditure and what the outcomes were. I saw the list of objectives, but I didn't see outcomes per se or any defined metrics on them.
Madam Chair, through you, we would like to make a written submission as to the details that would have contributed to that increase.
Let's just make sure. So what we're talking here about, is it the multi-sectoral and other services?
The PSRIP?
Public sector reform preparation.
I'll find the name. I'll
Yes,
find it.
it's the public sector reform preparation program. Is that it, Member Raful?
I'm looking for the exact title. There were two projects. I don't
Yeah.
know exactly which one this was titled
Okay, so
as.
this would be the one started in 2004?
2006, I believe, but it could have been 2004.
It should have been completed in 2006. Let's just make sure we...
Yes, 2004,
That's,
you're right.
okay, so that's the one we're talking about with respect to making a written submission. And therefore, if I might just interject here to ask if this would not be considered a legacy project, and if it is, why is it still under PSIP? So I don't know if that could be responded or if that's going to be in a whole amplified response. But I think Member Raful is also asking about deliverables.
Thank you.
Okay?
Okay, may I?
Yes.
Please. Okay, admittedly, the project did start as far back as 2004. It was a loan agreement between the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and the Inter-American Development Bank. While it did have probably, I think it was approximately 3-year projected project life, the project was not actually closed off until 2012-13 thereabouts. It is not a legacy project, one of those that goes on indefinitely. In terms of the key objectives of the project, it wasn't by design an actual reform project to target particular things, but rather it would inform what were the specific items or issues within the public service that should be addressed to bring about reform. So, for example, prior to the loans negotiation, it was acknowledged that there had been 10 to 14, I think 14 is the actual figure quoted, 14 public service reform initiatives over the years with varying degrees of success. A review of those initiatives identified that there were structural, system-wide issues that may have affected their successful implementation. So maybe whether it would have been staffing issues, public service capability, capacity issues, policy, legislation. PSRIP was intended to identify and address those structural system issues so that future reform efforts would be successful, right? I think there was some fair amount of work done because there were a number of studies that did take place to identify some of the issues. Madam Chair mentioned, well, the issue of outputs. So there would have been issues of training was conducted under the PSRIP, leadership development, communication issues. Admittedly, we didn't get too much into the issues of legislative reform, which in many areas is a key concern because we are dealing in many instances with legislation, policies that need to be updated and brought into the modern scenario. But essentially, that is what PSRIP was about.
Okay, so that we still want the written submission because bringing this unaccounted for $7 million, bringing that
to account,
I think really needs some explanation, and certainly I think there needs to be some explanation. If I understand it well, it was supposed to cost $6.25 million, and I'm not sure if it is completed at 8 times the cost. I'm not sure if that is what is being communicated. And I think all of that is what is causing some sort of confusion in the minds of the committee. So I would really await a written submission further elucidating on this and explaining some of these issues. Member Raful, are you finished?
For now.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I'll allow Member Bodo just to follow up on this, and then I invite Member Antoine into the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regards to that project, I just want to be clear. It was completed in September 2013, you're saying. So is there like a final report from that project? Is that what is going to be submitted to the committee? Or is it going to be a report about a report?
Chair, through you, yes, member, there was an evaluation of the project commissioned by the IDB. We do have a copy of the evaluation report that summarized what eventually were the outcomes, the outputs, the successes, shortcomings.
So we can expect that report together with a report regarding the discrepancies and the delays and so on in this project?
Yes.
So we had to receive
Yes.
2 separate reports?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Member Antoine.
Good evening once again. I want to look at the area that you responded to in terms of contract employment to fill vacancies in the organizational structure. I'd like to ask what attempts have been made to update the public service establishment And what you mentioned some proposed changes. What are the proposed changes that may reduce your reliance on contract employment?
Thank you, Member. As I would have indicated, we do have our draft organizational structure. It is proposed, and this is a public service-wide change, as we attempt to reduce our reliance on contract employment, that there are some key support areas, structures in the entire public service that will eventually be on the permanent establishment. And those areas are in expertise will be required in ICT, communication, facilities management, program management, procurement, as well as legal. We do have legal in terms of state councils, but they know we may have to do some tweaking of the job descriptions. So eventually we are going to be having structures in terms of our permanent establishment in those expert areas.
In addition to your contract, you made a distinction between contract labor, short employment, and short-term employment, right? With a 6 months duration for the short-term employment. I want to know, are there people who are still employed in excess of 6 months? Because now that no longer short-term employment is beyond 6 months. If so, are their contracts being renewed every 6 months? And if there are currently people who have gone over 6 months and are waiting renewed contracts?
We have reduced in terms of our short-term employment. Regarding the actual short-term employment, it should not exceed 6 months. But what we will have with persons who may be waiting for renewal of contracts. And at this time, we have about 2 areas where we have contract positions that were recently approved, and we are going through the recruitment and selection process. So these persons have applied and will go through the recruitment process, and we do hope that they may be successful. So they will eventually be in fixed-term employment contracts, which roughly would be 3 years.
So they are going from short-term employment to fixed contract?
Once they have gone through the recruitment and selection process, yes.
Another question involves, obviously, short-term employment, but involving our undergraduates and our graduates. How many undergraduates or graduates do we have in the ministry with short-term employment? And is this being done on an individual basis, or is it being done in collaboration with UWI, UTT, USC?
At this time, we don't have any undergraduate because they usually are available after their exams, so usually May to September, which is a cabinet authority that all ministries can engage undergraduates and graduates. It would have been limited due to the financial constraints. We are hoping that we are able to bring in persons, particularly in areas of communications and ICT, because we see it as an area of exposing the graduates or undergraduates to the world of work in terms of career in the public service, and hopefully wooing them at some time to come into the public service. So it's a developmental tool and mechanism that all ministries can utilize in terms of their own mandate. I would say about 2 months ago, we did have a collaboration with COSTAT, and we had certain interns assigned to our radio unit, and they did very well in terms of helping in the work and doing research and even voicing some of our radio programs. So it is a success story in bringing in our graduates and undergraduates.
There are some undergraduates, some graduates who have gone on careers that there are very limited prospects for future employment. Is there any collaboration between the Ministry of Public Admin and the universities so that students can be guided into what careers they are preparing for based on the availability of employment in the public service?
We have embarked on a public service awareness through our corporate communications unit. We had our first outreach during the carnival period, where we had exhibits for the archives and our NALIS. And this is part of our programs in terms of our outreaches, ensuring people are aware what the public service is about, not only Ministry of Public Administration, but the various public sector agencies. And through collaboration with the Ministry of Education, we do hope that we'll be able to do an outreach in the various tertiary institutions.
I'm an alumni of UE, so I could speak for UE. At the beginning of the academic year, UE normally has a program where you have booths where you can, encourage students to come and get displays from the public service, as the case may be, so they can, guide them in terms of their career. Is the Ministry of Public Admin participating at the level, not only in UE, but also with UTT and USC at that level?
This is one engagement we can embark on, but we are doing our separate outreach in the in tertiary institutions. But certainly I'm aware of the world of work, because at times I will assist in helping students how they prepare for interviews for the public service or generally. So certainly we will look into that, in that we can be part of that career outreach during the start of this semester.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to ask a follow-up from a question that Member Antoine asked, and again it's with the short-term employment. I understood from a response that some people would graduate from short-term to contract. I think what I would really like to ask is how, and if you don't have the information, Madam PS, we can get it later in writing, how many people would be doing a continuous set of short-term employment? So your 6 months is up, you get another 6 months. So not that you're graduating to contract employment, but you are consistently doing 6-month terms.
As I indicated, we are reducing the level of short-term employments that is surpassing the 6 month. And this, how we were able to do that is we're getting the approval of contract and positions, which we would have advertised, and these persons who have been qualified will go through the recruitment and selection process. With respect to other short-term employment, we can provide some information on that, but we do have a mechanism and strategy that we want to implement in the new financial year. Yes.
So if you can share with us the numbers, because
Yes.
that's what I really want, a definite number.
Yes.
And in your further responses, if you could share with us what is the strategy that will aim to reduce that. Because I appreciate that short-term being graduated to contract can work, but that is provided that the person has applied
Yes.
and succeeded.
Yes.
What I'm looking at is really if there are people who haven't applied or who haven't succeeded, but who get a next 6 months and a subsequent 6 months, and how many of those?
Yes, Chair.
All right?
Certainly.
Thank you. So can I go back now to Member Bodo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam PS, I just wanted to go back to the outreach programs, and that's commendable. But my question really is, in your outreach programs, you're saying what are the various areas that are available for employment. But do you have any statistical data in terms of the vacancies that are actually available in the public service and within Trinidad and Tobago in those various areas? Or I'm not sure you understand what I'm asking. Is it a data or information-driven outreach, so we can go out there and the citizens can be told, okay, you have 100 vacancies in this area or potential vacancies? Are we anywhere close to that kind of information?
I should clarify, the public awareness was not a recruitment drive. Actually, it is meant to educate, inform the public of what the public service is about. What are the various ministries, what are the departments, what are the public sector agencies. However, we are looking in partnering with the Ministry of Education and going to the tertiary institutions to entice, encourage, attract persons who may be interested in coming into the public service. These are the careers, these are the areas of need. And certainly it will be and link to our national development strategy. These are areas of growth. As you start your career in the public service, in the university, as you start your course of study, these are areas eventually that there will be instances.
I understand, and that's commendable, but the point I'm making is that there are many graduates who are out there without jobs. So that is fine, but what I'm asking, are we in a position to provide information as to what the jobs that might be available?
Well, with our partnership with the various ministries, they will be able to do that. So when we go out on the outreach, particular 1 week, we'll have the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, and they will be able to provide persons. These are some areas that we have vacancies. But I must remind you that the vacancies have to be advertised by the Service Commissions Department. So, we need to ensure that the information that we are provided would be in line to what the service commissions will eventually advertise. So we do need some communication and collaboration, but in the first instance, it's really a sharing and informing people about the public service.
Yes, Member Duque.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With your permission, I would like to revisit the issue of training and the Public Service Academy. And in your submission, you identified as a major objective of the PSA, I'm reading from the submission, reposition the PSA as the preferred agency of learning and development for public sector employees. And that sounds really beautiful. And that's the what. Let me ask the how. How is this going to be accomplished?
And this is part of our whole strategic review and organizational structuring. At the moment, most ministries, all ministries, we are finding difficulty in accessing funds for training. In previous years, ministries were able to apply for programs delivered by the Public Service Academy, but they would also access training through other institutions. However, with the downturn, we are seeing more applications coming to the Public Service Academy. So we are looking in terms of re-engineering our processes. As I indicated, we are looking to get others facilitators. I would say Deputy PS would have indicated we are sourcing facilitators, subject matter experts from various ministries so they can assist the Public Service Academy. We are also re-engineering our process in that we want to provide more online training. It's going to be a transition which will take roughly 2 to 3 years. We are not going to be increasing the establishment because of the difficulty in the allocation and funding, but there are different approaches. Also, we want to be linking with other CARICOM agencies. We have the Caribbean Development Administration, which also provide training, and they want to partner with the ministry in terms of training to be offered not only in Trinidad, but regionally. So we are looking at various mechanisms in broadening our training approach.
Okay, you mentioned the cost of training, and that might be straightforward in terms of how it is measured. But the challenge oftentimes comes in terms of measuring the benefits of the training. So that to say that the training intervention works, you have to measure something. How you go about determining, because I see you trained 3,000 public officers. How do you know that that intervention is worth more than the cost of training? How do you measure that?
Indicated that there will be a first level evaluation, which is the reaction level. We are hoping to move to the other levels of evaluation, which will be treating with the learning, the behavior, and the results. We have to take it step by step because of the constraints, but certainly in working along with the human resource management units of ministries, we can able to enlarge in terms of how we do measure what training had been provided and the impact. And it not only at the individual level, but at the level of the group and the results of the organization. This is not being done now, but we do hope that these are the various levels of evaluation that we can move towards. Certainly, there are different evaluation strategies, but we think probably through ICT, some sort of engagement of type of evaluation, we will be able to measure. But these are just talks in progress. We haven't finalized how we would approach.
But you do see the need to...
Definitely, we need to have an idea of our return on investment because, yes, we are providing the training through the Public Service Academy, but if we count the cost, we have to provide in terms of the payment of salary of our advisors, the salary of the participants who are away for 2 or 3 days, yes, the materials that we provide, which we are trying now to move towards online type of. So yes, we need to look at the return of investment.
So that's one aspect of evaluation, evaluating the outcome versus the benefit. I don't know what you could share with us in terms of evaluating the training intervention itself, in determining that that is the right intervention to the training need that you're trying to satisfy.
And that aspect talks about the methodology that would have been used, whether it was a lecture, case study, role play, and it's appropriate really to the content. How do you want to deliver the particular material? Would you want to develop a decision-making skill through a case study? Or in terms of our customer service, we do a lot of role plays. So really it will actually be the training facilitator having the supervisor looking at the approach and seeing if that particular methodology was appropriate for the material and giving the appropriate evaluation report at the end. DPS may wish to add further because both of us were former trainers, so we can relate to what you're asking.
Chair, through you, member, I just wanted to probably add that what you're speaking about might refer to an instance where a training intervention or development intervention may have been geared towards a specific entity, rather than much of what we do right now is providing training to a broad-based number of participants drawn from a number of ministries. So you're not really in a position to say exactly what is the impact of the training in all of the 20 agencies that these persons may come from. But if we had an instance where Agency A came to the academy, came to the ministry and said, hey, we are having a specific problem. Could you design an intervention? And we went in with a targeted approach. It might be a bit easier to do all the levels of evaluation that PS referred to in that entity, rather than to measure the impact of one person from an agency staffed by 300 persons to look at the impact.
So you're saying that the Public Service Academy training approach is very generic as opposed to strategic and focused?
Not saying that at all. The Public Service Academy has gone through a number of incarnations. Over the years, it's been in existence since the 1960s. We have done training where we provide to a broad number of persons. We have done interventions to specific agencies, but oftentimes those types of interventions are based on invitation and request. We may not necessarily pick up and foist ourselves on an agency, right? So it's not about being strategic or not.
All right, thank you. I think the question might be better posed to the ministries, various ministries themselves. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Member Raful.
Thank you, Chair. I had one follow-up question on iGovTT and the GovNet Next Generation Network. The written submission that was provided said that there was a 99,000, it's just under $100 million. It's $99,991,370 increase in allocation for fiscal 2018 under the subheading Other Contracted Services, and that the reason for that increase in allocation was for the GovNet Next Generation Network. Can you elaborate on that particular project and what the objectives are and the metrics for measuring those objectives and the outcomes? Thank you.
Sure. GovNet NG is meant to advance the ICT infrastructure within government into a full cloud environment. It is comprised of several lots, and it will allow for multiple service providers. One of the current state is, at present, we are unable to advance because of funding challenges. So we are currently looking at what we have in terms of how can we make what we currently have best suited within the terms of reference and so on. When we do have the funds, all of the KPIs are indicated in terms of the service level agreements that are intended to take place. For example, the uptime that we expect in terms of redundancy and so on. So all of those things are elaborated and clarified within the terms of reference. And however, as mentioned, we haven't advanced beyond the terms of reference for the reasons identified previously.
Okay. And the entire cost of the project is $100 million, or is that just the increase for this year?
That will be the increase.
Okay, what's the entire cost of it?
The entire cost is an estimate. Yeah, is an estimate, and we would provide it in writing because there are several lots as well for consideration. So the details will be provided in writing.
Okay. And what's the timeline for it?
It depends on the situation with funding. Yeah.
Do you have an anticipated timeline?
Well,
So
actually, yeah.
If funding doesn't come through,
Right.
If a certain time, and then if it does,
if funding doesn't come through, essentially we'll have to keep doing what we're doing now with the mindset of small incremental improvements, which we are currently doing. So we'll continue like that until a decision is finally made with regard to that project you mentioned.
okay. So the $100 million allocation is going to fund the current activities, but if it is approved, will the total cost increase? So right now you're doing the incremental work, so that $100 million allocation that has been granted would continue to fund the continuation of that?
Yes, correct. And so the current incremental increases we're doing, we are trying for it to be at no additional cost, and that it will remain within that identified 100 million that you mentioned, just under 100 million.
Okay. So it's not a project with a defined timeline per se, it's an ongoing continuum to increase, to improve.
Right, okay, so let me back up a bit. GovNet itself is a closed project. However, is an operational item because persons, similar to your use of email and so on, within government, we connect all the ministries and divisions and so on. So it's in operational mode. And the intent was to upgrade this via the project GovNet NG. And so what we're doing now is, okay, looking at what we have operationally and how can we improve this without the need for additional expenditure in the meanwhile until a decision is finalized.
Okay. So the current $100 million
Yes.
will continue to fund the current activities. And then if there is an expansion in the project, what could that total cost be?
Right. The expansion will be the GovNet NG cost, which we'll provide a breakdown on by lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure, welcome.
Thank you.
Member Webster Roy, may I invite you now?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam PS, I just wanted an update on the SharePoint project and the expenditure to date, please.
Thank you, Member. Our Executive Director, Nalis, will share on that project.
Could you please remind me exactly what you would like?
The SharePoint project, I wanted the status of the project and the expenditure to date.
Okay. To date, we have not expended any funds in it because no funds have been released. However, we have gathered we've done the infrastructural work, we've done the consultation with iGovTT, we have had some training for our ICT support, and we have provided quotations, we have quotations in hand for the various licenses that we need, but we're awaiting the release of funds.
When did you start the project?
The project started in November 2017. However, it is not the first time that Nalis would be using SharePoint. It is basically an upgrade in that previously we had SharePoint 2010. However, SharePoint 2010 is no longer applicable. It cannot be upgraded. It's not supported again. So we do need to be able to provide a secure vehicle of communication for our staff. Nalis has approximately, about 1,000 positions, more or less. And most of our staff reside outside of the National Library building because we provide services in approximately 400 locations. So we need to be able to communicate with the staff in a secure way. The project was meant to be able to share documents, work in groups, eliminate the need for paper and transportation and messengers in many cases in terms of the administrative communication with staff throughout the Nalis network.
More question. So this upgrade, what would be the lifespan on it? You had 2010. How long did 2010 last? For 7 years?
It was in 2015 that most of the support for 2010 went through, in that we were no longer getting security updates, we were no longer getting the patches, and if we had a problem, then it came at a cost, whereas when it was being supported fully, those are things that we got complimentary.
This upgrade, how long that would last? Another 5 years before you need to change the system, upgrade the software again?
iGovTT will help in that.
Right. Member is really dependent on how often the vendor will provide the changes. In terms of, it's similar to, for instance, if we use Office, and you may be using Office 2010, but a new version comes out, and at a certain point, they will indicate they are no longer supporting that version. And if you need support, as in the case of Nalis, you need to pay an extra fee. But because we have an enterprise agreement with Microsoft, and SharePoint, the latest version of SharePoint will be part of it, hence it will only make sense to transfer onto. And that is the reason why. So essentially, it's difficult to say how long it will last, because it's really dependent on how often, for instance, Microsoft will upgrade, and secondly, how long they will support the previous versions. Yeah, sure.
Okay, I just wanted to ask a few questions to Madam PS. In terms of, in your submissions, you would have identified some issues which would have resulted from the merger. One, you discussed with respect to not getting the approvals and how that has been improving. You had identified cultural challenges. And I wanted, therefore, for us to give you an opportunity to explain what are cultural challenges and how have you dealt with resolving the cultural challenges which would have arisen from the merger.
Madam Chair and members, and joining the ministry in 2016, these were some of the issues that were brought to my attention by the various heads of departments as the ministries merged in different systems, whether the record keeping, the staffing, the accounting, the audit. We see, unfortunately, various ministries will have different approaches and operating systems. And the ministry would have certain policies in terms of how public administration would have operated. So you would have had some sort of differences and understanding. This is how we want things approached in terms of our record keeping, in our registry, regarding our communications, regarding our accounting. These are how the documents should be kept and where they should be maintained. So these were some of the areas of cultural differences. And again, through our heads meeting, we were able to share. These are some of our operational policies. We have to conform, and our various heads would help. This is what I see happening a lot. Our head of strategic services will offer to help a particular division that is new in the ministry. Our director of finance will meet with the staff, will call regular meetings. This is the approach in terms of the reports I would need. This is how you should do it. This is the time frame you should submit it. So those were some of the cultural. There were some human resource practices that were not, let's say, congenial in terms of discipline. So we had to undertake some disciplinary proceedings regarding how people would perform. Punctuality was a problem. Taking instructions, so where we had acts of misconduct, we initiated disciplinary proceedings. In some areas, we had people who have personal problems, so we were able to guide them to access employee assistance program. So those are the areas that we really would have highlighted as cultural challenges.
Let me just ask, the lovely description of cultural challenges, are these really challenges of bad practices? Or is it that because ministries are a little different, things may be done differently? Okay, so is it a disciplinary problem that is being described as cultural, or non-compliance with operating practices that should apply across the public service? And therefore, if it is, where is your public service academy, that training academy in that? Or is it that it could be excused because I was in a particular ministry and our needs were different, things were done in a particular way, and therefore now I'm in this ministry and there are different needs, I now have to learn practices that fit these needs? Which one it is? Or
Madam Chair,
more of which than what?
Combination in terms of the approaches of the whole public service ethics, values, abiding by necessary policies and regulations. We have inconsistency across the board. So
I'm going to stop you there, because where is the Public Service Academy in addressing that? I have seen lovely programs for, internal audit and whatever. But where is the academy in terms of dealing with what is a public servant? How do we describe a public servant? What defines a public servant? Where is the Public Service Academy in addressing that basic issue?
in terms of the needs assessment, and when we discuss what are some of the requirements of the Public Service Academy has engaged in train the trainers, orientation programs. When you have orientation conducted in your ministries, these are the steps. These are some of the areas that you should include in terms of the public service values. What is the public service attitudes? What is your code of conduct? some of the other programs that we have been launched into financial management for non-accounting officers. So these are the financial management procedures. We are just completing when we prepare estimates. These are requirements when you prepare estimates. So bit by bit, we are looking at the whole and some of the areas of need that we need to ensure that we don't have that lack of conformity and inconsistency in practices.
And this basic question, who is a public servant? What defines me as a public servant? Who addresses that? Who monitors that? Who evaluates that? Who ensures continuity in that? Because it's okay for me to be skilled, but if I don't know who am I supposed to be, then what? And that's what I'm trying to get from all this training that I'm hearing.
In my view, public servant is a person who is on the public service establishment in order to facilitate service, provide service to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And once you are a public officer, there are certain regulations, there are certain policies and practices that you are exposed to in order to ensure you perform your job effectively and efficiently. There is a structure, so you will have public officers starting from your manipulative, your messengers, your secretaries, right up to the permanent secretary. And there are certain expectations and accountabilities that you carry in respect to the office you hold as a public officer.
And I am sure a lot of people would ascribe to your definition. What ensures that Miss Clark, in whatever entity, understands that and fulfills that? Because there may be a view that a public servant is somebody who is on the public service establishment, who draws a salary, who comes to work at 8:30, who doesn't begin to work. When he comes to work at 8:30, he's now having his breakfast. When he's finished his breakfast, then he goes and he speaks to his other co-workers about what happened in the last 12 hours, and then may begin to work at 11, but at 11:30 is getting ready for lunch, okay, and so on. Therefore, what deals with that ethic and promotes the correct ethos and philosophy, measures it, and reinforces it? Where is that course? Or how is that delivered?
That would deal with our supervisory middle management, even treating with disciplinary procedures. But an officer who comes in at 8:30 and is chatting instead of doing work has a supervisor who will have certain deliverables and results that they have to achieve for that particular section. So I will want to ask the question, where is the supervisor?
And you know, Madam PS, it may mean that if that question is asked and asked at the other level, it comes right up to the accounting officer. It may mean that. So that as the premier, what it is again, that lovely description of what you'll aspire to, the question still remains to be answered. How do we get to be this premier? If it appears, because what I'm saying is not something I've heard, it's something that I've seen. Okay, and I'm sure I'm not wearing special lenses. How do we treat with that? I think is what, to me, I'm not hearing any discussion with respect to the Public Service Academy, if it's that. Or maybe with the, what you call the committee of the PSs again?
Board of Permanent Secretaries.
Yeah, maybe it's there. I don't know, but maybe in your function, in your line ministry, looking at HR and so, maybe some of the more fundamental, basic issues are not being treated with. But again, according to culture, pension and leave records. And
Madam
your challenge
Chair,
with that.
Madam Chair, I would want to respond to that question because in the approach, state one, the Public Service Academy treats with training and development for all categories of staff. So we do have training for for permanent secretaries, deputy permanent secretaries, which we just completed a first course, and we are about to start a second course for another level of deputy permanent secretaries. And we have supervisory training, but we also help ministries in shaping programs. It starts with the orientation as a clerk, a messenger, whoever walks through that door. How do we orient the staff, the officer, to the public service? And that is also very crucial at the ministries and line ministries. Deputy Permanent Secretary also wanted to add.
Madam Chair, I think PS just took the wind out of my sails. Because yes, there is a suite of training courses that the Public Service Academy does provide, and PS touched on them, for all levels in the public service. Now, we also recently, within the suite of courses for 2017-18, we have included issues related to disciplinary procedures, the role of the investigating officer. So in those instances where there are disciplinary matters, public officers, whether at the supervisory, managerial level, are given information on the how-to in terms of treating with infractions that staff may commit. But PS is right. A lot of the issues that you raised in your statement relate to supervisory issues, where the first-line supervisor may have failed in addressing the matter or addressing it properly, and that is something that we cover in our supervisory development training. We have done a lot of work with ministries in terms of the trainers and helping them in terms of delivering and developing their own orientation and induction programs. With the human resource management training, understanding that the first-line human resource manager is the supervisor. So there's a lot of work to be done, but there's work that has been done, and we continue to work.
Thank you, Mr. DPS. Member Buru.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to follow on the issue of the service that the citizen, gets at public institutions and public entities. And I want to go back to how we evaluate training. And in your submission, on page 23, we speak about the Kirkpatrick evaluation model, which, of course, is 4 levels. And there is a statement here under point 4 in your response. The Academy intends to commence a structured evaluation of its activities to determine the impact on service delivery. My question is it the first time that this kind of evaluation exercise has been undertaken of PSA activities, or is it just for this financial year? Can I have some clarification on that?
The Public Service Academy, and I think PS hinted it previously, the Academy has always done an evaluation of its courses. It's one of the performance requirements of the human resource advisors who staff the division, that at the end of each training activity, a course report is done, and inside of that course report would have been an evaluation. Admittedly, thus far, and it is really because of staffing constraints.
An evaluation of the course.
An evaluation of the course.
Not an evaluation of the impact on service
Correct.
delivery.
Right.
So I want to be clear on that.
Yes. The evaluations, unfortunately, that we've been able to do thus far are merely at the level 1, which is the reactionary. Did the course meet the objectives that were stated? Did the participants have a good time? Did you learn anything new? What do you see as being applicable to your job when you get back? But to a lesser extent, and as I was saying, it is primarily due to staffing constraints. It's a committed bunch, but there's just so much that we could do. I think right now the Academy, it's 14 persons to train a public service of over probably 50,000.
Well, I hear you, DPS, and I suspect that there's quite a bit of enthusiasm for the training, but that in itself speaks to a problem. If you have a staff of 14 to train that many public servants, that's an issue that needs to be addressed, PS. But the question about, the follow-up question to that is that if you're only able to reach levels 1 and 2, so the end result should be the impact on the behavior of the public servant and the results. In other words, customer service is what we're looking for. Then how can you be sure that the training that you're providing is really making a difference? Is it that we are spending the money on the training without really knowing the true impact of those training courses? I don't know if you understand where I'm getting to. We might be doing the same thing over and over, but we might be doing the wrong thing or the inappropriate thing. So how do we go forward from this point?
I think just to piggyback on the question that Member Webster Roy may have asked before in terms of innovations, it may lie in that to the extent that we are able to partner, collaborate with the ministries, departments who are the recipients of the training and actually have them conduct the impact assessment at their end. So as PS hinted, the higher levels refer to the impact on the job. How has job performance attitudes changed on return to the office? What is the impact of the training on the actual, output of the ministry? Engage the ministries to do that level of analysis for us and feedback, so we would have a better idea of enterprise-wide how effective the training has been.
Thank you. Madam PS, if I may, and I just want to go back to your definition of a public servant, and with the greatest of respect, I would want to suggest that perhaps the requirements of the public should be paramount and perhaps preface the requirements of the public servant in that definition. And I mean that with the greatest of respect. But my question to you in terms of the follow-up, and we spoke about the issue of discipline and so on, and this is just a question that I'm asking you broadly. Is it really the goal of the public service to eliminate contract employment? And what are your views on the role of contract employment? Because, some will submit that perhaps the best form of discipline is a contract.
Member, if you don't mind, I'd like to go back to the question regarding training and the human resources. As I had indicated, we are in the midst of doing our organizational structure, which is in draft, and we will treat with the staffing issues at the Public Service Academy. And respect to the
other was just your opinion as a very senior public servant,
yes,
who's been there for a while, as to what you feel might be the role of contract employment overall in the public service, as opposed to everyone having permanent employment.
I don't want to preempt the work of a committee that had been constituted to look at the whole issue of contract employment. There is a report before Cabinet, but in terms of practices globally, internationally, I should say, regionally, and structures of public service, we are moving. You see in public service more moving into ICT-driven type of operation. So we will need, in terms of specialized skills, at times, if they are not available on the public service establishment, we will need to have contract positions. And in an organization, you will need core functions in order to fulfill the mandate of a government agency. Your accounts, your HR, your policy making, your monitoring and evaluation. However, as I indicated, we are seeing the move towards ICT-driven type of public service delivery. So we are looking at that approach in terms of e-government services, discussions and, brainstorming sessions. How do we see the 21st public service for Trinidad and Tobago, the best practice? How can we be delivering efficiently, effectively, and on-time service? There are certain areas that we can see that we can address through ICT. Immigration services, why can't we have persons applying online for passports? Why we have e-tax? It's a success story in terms of e-delivery services. We have the single electronic window, which we are expanding in terms of working with the Registrar General's department. We are also looking at e-transactions because not only because of the security issues, but people are more using their cards. You can do your transaction rather paying in cash. We can do e-transactions. So these are some of the service delivery enhancement projects that we are looking at in collaboration with iGov and other agencies who are ready to move towards that service.
And I hear you, and I know also there's an initiative with the Ministry of Works and Transport with regards to your driver's license and so on. But my point remains, and I want to, support what the chairman is saying. That there remains an issue of perception. Well, it's more than perception; it's reality that you go to a government facility, and at the entry level, at the greeting level, you encounter less than ideal service. And the question really is, how close are we to changing that?
And one mechanism, as I indicated quite early in the discussion, is that we have embarked on a customer service delivery. It's only part of a whole service delivery improvement process. So we are engaging in training of our first line and other levels in the ministries and departments.
Do you have any program in place, any initiatives where you might have someone anonymous in the public entity monitoring and evaluating quietly the kind of service that is delivered? Because in a previous incarnation as chairman of RHA, we did have that initiative where you would have people just going into the emergency department, for example, or the clinics, and trying to assess the kind of service that was delivered by the staff. Do you have anything in place like that, or do you propose anything like that?
At present, we don't. However, back in 2012, I think it was, during one of the previous initiatives of the ministry to improve service delivery, we did have that initiative, the mystery shopper, where we did in fact have persons engaged who went out to ministries and departments, as you said, as anonymous seekers of services. And they, well, through their interactions, observations, we had a very, if you want, objective and scientific approach to it, whereby entities, their staff, their systems, well, processes were assessed. Actually, it was all part of, like I said, a previous initiative that worked quite well.
Can you share the reasons then why that has not continued?
Or
do you feel there's a role for it again?
There is a role for it. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that is initiated by the Ministry of Public Administration. There's no reason why every agency can't have a mechanism in place that incorporates the mystery shopper to assess and evaluate its own service delivery. Maybe what the ministry can do from its end as a leader in terms of policies, suggest how the thing can be done, what are the guidelines, they provide some kind of monitoring support for it. But I think it is a workable effort.
Is it a policy for employees, frontline employees who interact with the citizens to wear name tags?
Not at this time. Many organizations do have ID cards, name tags, and it is really up to those agencies to enforce compliance. But there's no stated policy.
Yeah, the problem with ID cards is they're designed somehow that when you wear them, they switch around so you don't see the person's name. I'm sure we're all familiar with that. But do you think there'd be any benefit into employees wearing name tags? Because, certain studies have shown that the moment somebody can be named, it makes a difference in their behavior and the quality of the service that they deliver. And this is a very simple, cheap, inexpensive initiative. Can you share your opinion on that?
Well, you're certainly right in that it's relatively inexpensive and not too difficult to introduce, but in terms of the compliance issue, that is most likely something that we'll have to enter into discussions with the representative unions, yeah, really.
No, I mean, certainly that could be something that could be built into terms of employment. I mean,
And therefore would be a negotiable issue.
but there we go. We're back to square one there.
Member Bodo, Member Duque, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to go back to the issue of culture, not in the context of the merger and maybe the cultural clashes that may have existed at that point in time and probably still do, but the whole issue of the ministry's culture and the development of your strategic plan. Was the issue of culture from an organizational standpoint addressed at all in the ministry's plan?
Yes, member, and as I said, we can share the plan when it's approved, but we would have crafted the culture in terms of what are the values, and as I would have started, accountability, transparency, quality of service. Those are some of the areas that we would have identified.
Okay, and in terms of performance, would you say that currently there exists a high performance culture in the organization, and I'm talking about the ministry?
Generally, yes. We have very committed and dedicated and a very strong performance management culture. So we would have our, as I said, quarterly, half-yearly reports, ensuring our performance appraisals are prepared for both our monthly paid, contract, and short-term.
Okay.
So it is performance-oriented.
And in the context of performance and that culture we're talking about, what is the relationship between performance and progression and promotion and development?
The performance appraisal would be used by the Public Service Commission in respect to permanent employees. So before promotions are done, the performance appraisal plays a key role in that particular process at the Commission.
Okay, and also in the context of culture, and you would have identified the issue of high service delivery and public trust. And I'm speaking to that with regards to the whole issue of organizational culture. How do you know that your customers are satisfied and they are happy with the service that is rendered to them? In other words, yeah. I'm getting to the question, is that measured?
This area, as I was going to indicate, will need to be strengthened. We need to have feedback mechanisms, stakeholder engagement, which we would have done in our strategic plan, in our various consultations for development of an ICT plan. But we do need that approach in having a formal way, a formal mechanism. We will have feedback or questions through our social media, but an actual formalized feedback strategy, this will have to be strengthened in this.
So currently you're saying that it does not exist?
No.
Or it exists in an informal way?
Informal way and to various levels. For example, informally, you will get feedback in terms of persons who are accessing the service of our Property and Real Estate Services Division, or who access the service of our Public Management Consulting Division, and ministries would indicate some of their challenges. So that is a feedback to us in terms of how we should improve certain processes. But formal mechanism, this needs to be strengthened.
And also, in the context of culture, you mentioned the e-tax intervention, which you describe as a success story. So I am thinking that you want this type of success culture in your ministry. How is this story told to the public, and in terms of this outstanding success being communicated to your customers as an encouragement to engage the intervention and to also engage other interventions so that other interventions can become success story and that success culture can be developed and become pervasive in the organization? Could you address that, please?
Yes, member, and coincidentally, just prior to coming upstairs, the acting CEO, IGov, and I were chatting in terms of how we are going to collaborate with our communication strategies in sharing some of the programs under the ministry and probably the wider public service that are ICT related. Certainly the e-tax will be an area, although it falls under the portfolio of Ministry of Finance, we will need to collaborate with Finance in sharing certainly the success of that particular e-service.
So the success story you're saying is currently a secret. A story that has to be told, of course.
Has to be told, yes.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. P.S., I just wanted to find out, I was asking about the pension records, which you will have trying to update consequent upon the merger to get an idea of, what success you've met with respect to that thus far.
I wouldn't have the data in terms of persons who would have gone through the public service and would have received their benefits. I can provide that in writing. But what we have done through the intervention of the Ministry of Finance, who would have sent out circulars to all permanent secretaries, accounting officers, and heads of department, we have established a pension and leave unit within the Human Resource Management unit. They would have done projections in terms of persons who are to retire within this year and updated their pension and leave records. We also are doing a forecast for the persons who are to retire within the next 5 years. At the end of March, we have to provide a report to the Ministry of Finance. Also, every month I will get updates regarding the work that the pension and leave would have done in the ministry, some of the challenges, and we would have shared in accessing records of persons who would have served in other ministries, or even within the ministry, we might have challenges in terms of when it went to accounts, how timely we got the response, although there has been great improvement or audit. So we are looking at the processes. But I would like to invite my Deputy PS, because we have been collaborating, and the Ministry of Finance, through the Comptroller of Accounts, has requested our assistance in helping reform the pension and leave process in this service. Deputy P.
Thank you, PS. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it has been voiced in this forum that there are a number of challenges with respect to the timely payment of terminal benefits, not only to established officers, but also contract officers as well. And the Ministry of Public Administration and Communication did receive, as recently as I think December of last year, a request from the Comptroller of Accounts to assist in moving forward a project that sought to address the processing of terminal benefits at the Treasury, because that is where the Pensions Administration resides. So we have begun to work with the Comptroller and her staff, particularly those of the Pensions Branch, in terms of mapping out a project that is really looking at a module of the IRIS, the PeopleSoft application for HR, that module that deals with pensions administration. So the actual module has been purchased sometime now, and we are really developing a project that would seek to have it properly implemented and operationalized in the pensions branch.
Could you give me a kind of time frame for the completion of the design of this project, the rollout of the project, if people have to be trained, if that is being done contemporaneously with the design, so that, so that this project could be implemented and people get some relief. It's sad when you meet people, and I'm sure it happens to you more than it would happen to us. You meet people and say, I've retired 2 years now. I'm living on my savings, and I can't get my pension.
Okay, admittedly, like I said, the relevant module has been purchased. But if you want, we could describe that module as being plain vanilla. it has to be customized to meet the regulatory framework, the processes that exist within the pensions branch. So what is really being done right now, like I said, is to develop a project for implementation, for the customization. The pensions division is ambitiously looking towards making a submission for funding to be included in the next fiscal, that is 2018-19. So with much luck, much hard work, we are hoping that a submission could be made when next estimates go forward, which is really April of this year. Yeah. And to be rolled out, to be fully rolled out, if successful, it would probably be a 2-year period thereabouts.
We're looking at 2021 at best.
It would appear that way, Chair.
Okay. Well, I hope with much luck, much work, we make it 2020, but we'll see. All right, so I just wanted to ask, though, about your asset management system, which we are told is an open source solution. Does that mean it's a free application?
Yes, it is. It's open source.
So it's a free application, right? So this is still in a pilot phase as resources have been directed to address an urgent matter. The resources won't be financial resources.
But it's not finance, it's human resources.
Human resources. Might I ask, what is the urgent matter?
Well, we had another project within the ministry dealing with the, if you want, the inventory, the records system for properties. So a lot of the emphasis was assigned to that project.
That inventory for properties, that project, is it completed?
We are still in the developmental process. Yeah, maybe the court.
Okay, that.
Yes, Madam Chair, we are, as DPS was starting to say, we are still in the developmental stage. We did do a pilot exercise to test the open main solution to determine whether, in fact, it can meet our needs in terms of our property management system. And for coming out of that pilot exercise, I think it was determined that it will meet our requirements. We have started with the focus on the lease rental properties, and it is intended that we will move on to state-owned properties being added to that database. And the database is also supposed to, the system, is also supposed to allow us to continue to design in such a way to include other data fields which would speak to maintenance of the buildings, asset inventory of the buildings. All of that could be included into the system, and expenditure. Okay, but for now we're doing the lease rental accommodations. So these are privately owned properties that are rented by the state. And so far, we have basic information entered in terms of tenant information, owner information, and some property details on the rental. So information on the rental sum that has been negotiated, and the statutory approvals that come with those properties. But we do hope to extend. So we continue to design out the system to include more data fields as we go along.
Okay, thanks. All right, so maybe I better ask this. What, in terms of quantum of resources, what quantum was needed, and it's human resource, how many people were needed for this asset management system pilot in the first place?
Madam Chair, we would have utilized our in-house software developers, OJTs, who numbered about 3 persons. We had a supervisor, the supervisor who was on contract had to proceed on contract leave.
Okay, all right. So you had 4 people,
Yes.
and then you decided you were going to deal with the other project to do with properties.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I might be a little confused because I thought from the submission that the asset management system was also, it was the same system that was being applied to capture properties and office stationery.
It is, however, it had to be attuned to what are the fields, what are the data sets that would have been required under the property lease and rental, which will be different from your inventory assets.
Okay.
And the same persons who would have developed the program for archives were the same resource that were required to develop the PMIS. They were on short term. They only returned in February, and they have been continuing with the PMIS. However, we have another ICT personnel who has been trained on the system, so he has been carrying through with the asset development and the training and whatever tweaking that needs to be done at archives. That has not really stopped. And we are hoping that by April we can move into another division. So
You've restarted your first pilot?
Yes.
That's what I understand?
Yes.
So the technical meetings which were intended for February 2018, those have taken place?
That would have taken place.
And that will be dealing just now, so that, please stand. So that allows for the continuing of the archives project?
Yes.
Are we on track for the second pilot in government printry, which you expect to start in April?
Yes, because our individual who is the supervisor will be back on contract by the end of March.
So that you would shortly have a complement that will allow you to run both.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thanks very much. All right. Now, I wanted to ask something about the tagging also, which I think with good explanations we've been getting so far will help clarify us confusion in our minds. Now, what you told us is that you've completed tagging everything at head office?
Yes.
What about your satellites?
Yes, the internal audit confirmed through her report that the tagging has been completed.
Right.
There.
So that everywhere you finish and you're tagging, is this an electronic system or is these manual? Manual,
but eventually to be converted into electronic system.
And eventually is how soon?
That will depend on the
budget?
Not the budget, the use of our human resources, because they are the persons who are treating with the software development aspect.
All right.
In archives and PMIS.
All right. So give me an idea, time frame.
I would certainly set a deadline by the end of this financial year.
For commencement or completion?
To try and complete.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So let me ask another question. In terms of this, you said to us that you, let me just get it. You don't have an inventory unit at head office.